Welcome to the Asheville View. I'm Aisha Adams, and today I'm here with City Council hopeful Sage Turner. How are you?
Hi, thank you for having me. I am, despite, all that's happening in the world, I'm doing okay. Yeah, and I'm thankful to be here. Thanks for doing this and hosting all the candidates and helping get the word out.
I am so excited to finally get a chance to sit down and talk to you. I think we've been Facebooking it forever, just trying to get this done. You've been doing so many things, both in the community and I'm sure working and trying to stay sane during all these things. Tell me a little bit about your background and the work that you do and how it relates to City Council.
Sure. Let's see. So I've lived in Asheville for 20 years. I moved here just after college and started a family here, and actually live in the same house I've lived in all those 20 years. So I live in West Asheville. And my background has been in finance management and nonprofit and kind of board level stuff and lots of financial planning. So I did accounting for a variety of small businesses over the years and nonprofits, and then got into more of a real estate kind of assistance and pre-development work and sorting through projects and what different communities need. Lots of community building, especially in West Asheville. West Asheville's changed a lot in the last 20 years. And as my kids got older and started going on to high school and stuff, I started realizing that I had a great passion for city planning. So I actually went back to school and studied city planning in grad school, and started getting involved in more of the city boards. So transitioning from nonprofit boards to more of the city government boards and just really digging in. And it's all kind of come together to what I'm doing now. So I work for the French Broad Food Co-op, which is the community-owned grocery store in downtown. I've been there for about 45 years. And well, been in downtown for 25, but been an organization for 45. And they were at a pivotal point. They came to me just after the crash in 08 and 09 and weren't sure how to proceed. And they needed some financial advice. And so I started working for them part-time and really kind of discovered that the industry itself needed to be just redone differently, that volume was such a big deal. And so we quickly moved into kind of expansion planning and looking at what we could do to get on track to be a bigger store. And it took about 5 years of prep to even get them ready. And then in the last couple of years, we've been actually designing buildings and things. And just today, put up our silt fence and are starting our construction. So currently I'm the project manager for about what'll probably be 3 years of construction of expanding the buildings down there. The co-op is community owned, but we also own a lot of real estate. So we're doing a pretty community oriented project with some affordable housing and some more parking and some more affordable retail spaces for small business. And yeah, it's been a culmination of things. At the city boards, I chair the downtown commission, which is the body that reviews kind of all the policies for downtown and all the design reviews. So all these big projects, all the hotels in the last 5 years I've had to review and critique, and all the big apartment complexes and stuff. And I also chair the Affordable Housing Committee, and we've been working on a pipeline of affordable housing for about 5 years that is just starting to kick off. So yeah, I'm kind of all over the place, but my primary work is at the French Broad Food Co-op.
Yeah, it seems like you are deeply involved in city planning, and some of the things that you mentioned that are really interesting to me is real estate, project management, affordable retail spacing, affordable housing. So the question on everybody's mind is, what is your plan for affordable housing? What will you bring to the table in that discussion to push the initiative along?
Oh, great question, right? I think it's one of our most pivotal needs. So one of the biggest reasons I'm running for council is to execute the plans that this whole community has been working on for so many years. So like I said, I chair affordable housing. I've been on that board for 5 years, and that dates back to when we were actually trying to rally support for the bonds and helping get those passed and helping rewrite all the policies and the programs and really kind of digging in to say, why is it? Why is affordable housing such a challenge to create? Why aren't we getting more of it? Why don't we have enough of it? And what has the community experienced in these last few decades that has made it such a hard thing to do and keep and maintain? And so I'd say the plan is pretty diverse. I mean, I've spoken for hours on this topic, but it really comes down to, in the next few years, spending the bonds, prioritizing home ownership, getting our incentive policies, which are the state restricts how we can help subsidize projects. So we had to come up with some maneuvering on paper, basically, but aligning those incentives with better projects and better developers, partnering with the county so they'll partner on a property tax incentive so we can reduce the cost. We can't do things like inclusionary zoning or rent control in Asheville, so we have to be more creative, and we have to kind of break down the things in our UDO, which is all the rules of how we build things, to find out why our own processes are costing and creating more expensive projects. So that's a big thing, like, why do we only have like a single family house or a big tall apartment? There's a thing called the missing middle, like these little 4-packs of apartments or accessory dwelling units where several families live on one property. What have we done in our community to make these things so hard to build? So we've been analyzing all these things and correcting them. It seems like every time we have an affordable housing meeting, we're updating a policy. And all of it is coming at this, like a peak, a momentum, where I've been telling folks we're going to open doors to 1,000 new affordable units in the next 4 years. And sometimes I think it's going to be more, but I'm certain that it's going to be 1,000 new units. And frankly, we need about 4,000. So it will just be a portion of it. But the momentum that we accomplish in the next few years, I think will set the stage to do it again and again.
I want to follow up with that. So I know that there's affordable housing and deeply affordable housing. Can you tell me what you know about deeply affordable housing and what steps are you taking in this work, since you're so entrenched in it, to ensure that there are deeply affordable houses?
Yeah, I call it accessible housing, but you're right, deeply affordable. So there are some actual criteria, and actually how we quantify our living wage in the certification program is also tied to this. So we know that it is not fiscally safe or sound for someone to spend more than 30% of their income on housing. That's kind of the baseline number. So no matter what you make, you shouldn't be spending more than a third of it on housing yourself. And that includes things like paying your power bill and your gas bill or water bill, or if you're a homeowner, it includes paying your property taxes and your insurance. So that's a mark level that we actually look at nationally. HUD, Housing and Urban Development, puts out that kind of standard. So that means if you spend more than 30%, you're cost burdened. If you spend more than 50% of your income on housing, you're severely cost burdened. So you have these two kind of dynamics. And right now we know half of our community is already cost burdened. So this is a problem of wages, but it's also a problem of housing inventory and lack thereof, pushing prices up. So what you're getting at really is how deeply affordable can you build things? So there's a criteria at which you qualify for a housing voucher, which you can use for rent or mortgage. And that's really when your income is below the poverty level. And we actually put out more housing vouchers than the community can even absorb. So we return half of them a year. So if you're in the 30 AMI or lower amount, you're probably getting a housing voucher. So we don't need to build units for lower than that AMI, but we need to make sure we're targeting at least that one. And then the next jump is around 50 or 60, which recently we've adjusted policies to focus on. And that means that we've taken an average of all the incomes in Buncombe County, and you have an area median income. And I know that term is used a lot and it's so confusing, so I'll take a second to explain it. So if you know you have 100 people in a community and the lowest income is $1 and you have 50 people making $100, the median is still that middle number. The median income would be the 50. And it's that point at which half the people are making more and half the people are making less. That's what median income means. So when we're talking about 100% median income, it means you're right in the middle. When we're talking about 60%, it means you're really in that lower tier and you start to need a lot more assistance. Historically, the city's policies were running at targeting 100 to 120% AMI, and our work on the Affordable Housing Committee in recent years has reduced that to 60 as a goal. So that's been an incredible resource. Does that answer your question? Because I know that's a real nerd answer, but I think
it was a great answer for me because I understand AMI, I understand deeply affordable,
Great.
but for our community that's at large, will there be deeply affordable units? That's what they want to know.
Yes, there will.
And out of those
and I think
affordable housing units, how many of those are you projecting will be deeply affordable?
well, that's a good question. I've never really looked at it like that. At what percentage of that are we aiming for?
And it's okay, you can go back with us on that. But that's really, in our community, that's the question we want to know. We want to know, great, you're doing affordable housing. That's not affordable for everybody. How many deeply affordable units out of those 1,000 units will there be? And we also appreciate the lesson on affordable and deeply affordable, because everybody talks about affordable housing and a lot of people don't know that. So thanks for bringing that to the forefront.
Right. Yeah, and we do keep a spreadsheet on this. So we do actually have a spreadsheet of the units we plan to open doors on, and we target them with what AMI. So I can get you that number.
That would be
a great
awesome.
resource.
We would love that
Yeah.
information. So my next question for you is basically one of the things that you said that just makes my heart sing is we've been looking at the policies. We've been changing the policies. And so a lot of what I'm doing is teaching people the difference between being an activist and being an advocate. And an advocate is someone who's at that table really looking at the policies, right? So I want to talk to you about a couple of policies that we see coming down, or talk to you about a couple of policies that have been in the news a lot lately. So the first one is reparations. I want to get your take on reparations. And I want to know, do you think the city and the county can afford them? And how do you plan to advocate at the table for reparations?
Sure, good. And I like this question. Advocacy versus activism is great. I'm definitely a policy nerd, so I'm more of the write it down, get it done, execute things. So reparations to me it's dynamic. It's in the past, it might have been thought of like some kind of cash fund given out to, what is it, $40,000 in a mule or something. There was these historical ideas that, acres, thank you. It's this historical idea that resources need to be directly handed over. I would love for that to happen. To do that, it would be a federal package. I've been watching us through COVID dole out billions, hundreds of billions of dollars. I've never seen a government in such hyper speed come to a $500 billion decision like they did with the PPP in March and April. And to me, it's a lack of political will to do that for something like reparations, but it's totally appropriate. We'll drop $500 billion on a bridge. I don't understand why we won't do it on equity, on establishing home ownership and entrepreneurship again.
What will reparations look like on a city level, in your opinion, or what should it look like, or what should city council advocate for it to look like?
Yeah, and that's what I was getting at. So, without a federal intervention, we're limited in what we can do. So I think on a local level, whether it's county or city in this case, it's going to be more about creating equity through some of the current inequities. So I would say the education gap, really resolving why it is that we have such a difference in our youth between Black and white children, and why we have the highest ratio of school to prison pipeline than any other city in North Carolina. These are, I think, things that have to be resolved with our youth, start the process over, get the next generations in a better way. I think reparations has to come down to restoring home ownership and business ownership and potentially commercial land ownership, because that's some of what we lost through the process of urban renewal, or some of what we prevented in the 30s with redlining. I think it's going to be part of the reimagining of public safety, because we know that there are disparities in how Black and whites are policed, for lack of a better word, and it's creating an ongoing cycle. So if we had redlining and urban renewal as past reasons that we've driven race disparities, now we have criminalization of Black men, and again, this education gap. So we're still perpetuating these things. So for reparations, for me, is to heal some of the past and restore, but also address how we're doing it again right now. One of the things that blows me away is that we talk in the community about how urban renewal dissected and took over a whole part of our city in several parts, but then we're doing it again with I-26. We're not really having the frank conversations. We're decimating more neighborhoods with a currently planned project going through our community. And we're still over here talking about what we used to do, but we're still doing it. So to me, reparations is more than just historical restoration. It's also really opening up our eyes and saying, what are we doing that's still what's still perpetuating this inequity and this disparity in income and generational wealth?
I think that's really interesting. So I guess I want to ask this question based on your answer. What is equity? And then to you, what's the difference between equity and reparations?
Okay. Equity to me is giving people what they need for where they are to get to a better place. So if equality is treating people the same, equity is treating people and giving them the resources they need to start at the same level. The most common and simplest way I ever heard it was, we're going to give everybody a red shirt. Well, that's equality. We're going to give everybody the shirt that fits them. That's equity.
Okay.
Now, what was the second part? How is equity separate than reparations?
Different from reparations, yes.
Well, reparations is really restoring what was prevented or taken, right? And to me, it's all based in equity. You know, it really did start, I guess, hundreds of years ago, but here in Asheville, literally in 1930s, when we started redlining and allowed federal groups like Holt to decide who does and doesn't get access to money. So to me, it's reparations is one of the arms of restoring equity.
Has a recommendation been made to defund the police, or has it gone through? Where are we in this? Where are we now with this, with defunding the police? Where are we?
I think there is an outcry and a request for council to change how much funding police is getting. What we've seen is the 30, 60, 90-day plan that our city manager has put out and has announced, you know, with this last, I think it was September 22nd council meeting, where she put forth an amended budget that I think trimmed to maybe almost 3% of the police budget, which was really a reallocation to other departments. So I'm not sure that there is a lot of movement on that. That budget will go through the end of our fiscal year, which is June 30th. So, you know, there hasn't been a whole lot more said from that. Now, I would say the community is still very loud in its desires for that funding to change.
And this is where that activism piece comes in for me. So the activist is just important, just as important as that. The advocate, the activist is just telling us what the advocate needs to hear. So you are hearing from the activist that we want to defund the police. As the advocate, how do you feel about that? And what do you think we should do? How do you feel about what the city manager has put forth, the reallocation, and what do you propose?
I think there's a lot more work to do. I haven't dug through what it is that, so I'll give a little background. You know, when we started this year, just before COVID hit, we were just starting to increase the number of officers from the 2017 decision. So that when we redistricted and created a new downtown district and added 15 officers in 2017, it actually was still being rolled out at the beginning of this year. So in January, we got an update that it wasn't even fully staffed. And then COVID hit. In our March meeting, we were real quick to say, okay, well, we agreed with staffing these positions because of the uptick in the economy and the tourism and stuff. But if we're all going to go into lockdown, let's freeze these positions and not hire for them. And I don't think that ended up happening. And I believe we've been rehiring even as we lose we've lost over 30 officers. So for me, the activism part, the part where I can engage, is to really get into the details of what's happening with the police force, with the redistricting. I know we're looking at going back to the older districts, which would shrink the squad some. I think there needs to be significant movement, regardless of the budget, on how we demilitarize. I don't think we need to be carrying riot gear, storing riot gear, rubber bullets, tear gas. Like, I'm really curious about the funding that has gone into building us to this militarized state, you know, and I don't think a lot of us as community members knew this. I know I didn't until what happened with the protests after George Floyd's death. And, you know, it's absurd to think that as a little community, if we use these uses of force every 50 years, that we're somehow storing them somewhere, replenishing them, that they expire, we're maintaining inventory, we're training officers on them. Like, to what extent can we remove these things? So that's something I'm particularly interested in. I'm also really focused on understanding, like talking with the homeward bound folks or the physical legal folks, or addiction in these households that are taking in folks that need transition time from getting off the streets or away from addiction. I'm trying to get into the other resources in the community that can have redirected funding and personnel to kind of take the lift off the police. You know, I think the police have, for better or for worse, or if we've all just allowed it to happen, have become these like do-all kind of folks in the community. They're called for everything. And I don't even think they like being called for everything. It's just how we've gotten here. So to me, that has to be dismantled. And we can't do it without a plan. Like I would not say today, yes, let's go defund 50%, because we don't have a plan. If we get to a plan that can attach a percentage to it and is practical and keeps our community safe and starts helping people more than hurting people, I'm all for it. But right now, it seems to be a lot of digging, research, understanding, building bridges with folks in the community that can take on some of the services that we need, making sure they have the funding that they would need and the training and resources, et cetera.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting concept, and you'll be the first person that I've really shared my thoughts with, because I think our thoughts are along the same line here. Is that I think we need to refund the police, and what I mean by that is really look at that budget, see where we can cut some things, and see where we need to add some things, because there definitely needs to be more training, and that's going to cost money, right? It's not going to be anything free. Yeah. We definitely need more community programming from our police department. That's not going to be free. And we also need to stop pretending that we can't fund other things without taking from something else, because clearly COVID has taught us that is not what we have to do. So I think there are some times in some spaces we can definitely, we should be cutting the budget. Like, I don't think police officers should kill someone and get paid administrative leave. They should not ever get paid administrative leave. Like, we should cut that out of the budget, right? So I just think that there is definitely some, as a finance person, we need to look at that budget more clearly. And I think that we need to get a refund on what we've given the police. So we need to really look at that, but we also need to remember that they are a part of our community. They live with us, and that we need them to do their job. So this leads me to my next question. Because keeping on the thought of city employees, I recently interviewed the firemen. So you know what's going on with the firemen. I want to get your take. I want to know specifically, do you support them making a living wage?
I do. And, you know, the co-op was the first living wage grocery store in the United States. And it took Just Economics and I some hurdles in figuring out how to get there. And I'm using that same approach with the firemen. And I've had extensive talks with them, and I'm proud to be recently endorsed by them. But what we're talking about here is two different things. So when the city made a universal decision to raise all workers to $15 an hour, it did not, as Scott Mullins of the fire department would say, apply to the firemen. And that is because of this underlying thing, which is how the firemen work their shifts. So they are on call or sleeping at these stations for hours that they're not technically paid for. So if we're paying them 40 hours a week, then their salary certainly looks like it's more than $15 an hour. However, if you account for the other 16 hours a week they're on call or sleeping at the station, then they're not making it. I recently did the analysis for the city just before this last council meeting, and if you notice there was a little kerfluffle during the meeting, it was because of an email I sent about like, hey, I'm confused. Because when I broke down using the 56 hours and the fact that they have benefits, which reduces the hourly wage by $1.50, I found that there were, I think, 27 firemen that were like this close to making a living wage at the 56 hours. It was like something like $40,000. It was ridiculous. And then the next group, which was, there's like tiers, and once you've been on the force for 6 months, you get a wage increase and so on. And to get everyone to this next tier of the new living wage, because you know, we're talking about $15 an hour, but the new living wage is actually $15.50. So to get them to that next wage was $165,000, and it was about 55 firemen. So to recap, there's really two things we're talking about. One, do the firemen deserve to be paid for 40 hours or 56 hours a week? And in my opinion, if you are not home with your family, not able to tuck your children in or eat dinner with your family, and you're not able to get a second job because you're on call for this other one, then you deserve to be paid for those hours. So I support this idea of looking at 56 hours. That is not normal throughout the state, and we'll hear this time and time again as we compare ourselves to other cities, that that's not typical. But I don't think that necessarily means it's how we need to do it. And then the next thing is we're talking about a different wage, $15 when living wage has jumped to $15.50. And there seems to be this absence of the conversation around the value of benefits. So right now, if 1550 is the living wage, if you are receiving benefits, then your hourly really should be $14 because the value of benefits is $1.50 an hour. So I really want the community to understand those two things: how many hours you work a week, how many hours a week you work, and whether or not you have benefits. And that's driving the wage conversation.
So I think that's all nice and well, but we're talking about our essential first responders. And so for me,
Mm-hmm.
for us literally to be teetering on the brink of survival for our first responders, that is unacceptable to me. Because
Agree.
what does it mean when you serve the community?
Yep.
You know,
I know.
so
And if you think about it, paying them $20 an hour doesn't sound crazy to me. I mean, this, like, the whole idea that they are barely getting by is ridiculous to me. You're right. They're first responders. They actually respond more than EMT to anything. They, if you call for an issue, that's who shows up. One thing I would love the fire department to do, and challenge them to do this, is to get creative with us. Nobody understands the inner workings of the fire department more than the firemen themselves. So I would love to hear from them. What do you see in your day-to-day operations that can help us trim expenses so that money can be reallocated towards better wages? And in conversations, there's actually been some ideas. Like, I don't know if you realize, but when we have a rural issue in the community that needs a fire response, if there is not a fire department or volunteer department in that area, our guys go. And it's not unusual for them to drive an hour and a half, spend half a day, and come back and use our local tax resources to help the area. So one of the things I'm wondering is, like with this Dogwood Health Trust initiative and the whole Western North Carolina health benefits we're trying to promote, should we be looking at more volunteer fire departments in other areas so we can keep our guys closer, save that expense, and better care for them with wages? And I think
we
there's
need
some
more volunteers. Like, people need to eat. We're in the middle of a pandemic. This is the most dangerous job in America. Like, why does it need to be volunteer? We're really talking about $250,000, $300,000 into the budget. Meanwhile, 3% of the police department budget is like way more than that. So I'm not really clear on why all of the runaround. It just seems political and not upfront. You know what I'm saying?
No, okay. Yeah, I'm sorry. I think we're talking about two different things. So if you're asking whether or not I support the firemen getting that funding to get the wages, I do.
Yeah.
And I advocated for it, and council knew that.
In those
I guess what I was getting.
Why can't we create jobs where firemen get living wages to do fireman work? Like, why do we still have volunteer firemen doing one of the most important jobs in America because we have COVID and they respond first?
Yeah, and I'm not sure how many are volunteer versus paid. I didn't really mean to drag them in as they need to be volunteers. I just meant we might need more stations. Like, the whole community and region might need to look at its inventory of how we're caring for the community, and do we have enough stations, volunteer or employee
But
aside.
I'm only triggered because if you never called 911 and got a volunteer fireman pull up in your driveway. When I was having Dorian, I lived in a really rural area. We dialed 911 and it's like this guy pulled up in like a red pickup and he was the fireman. So I'm just like, no, we actually need real firemen, no volunteers.
Yeah.
Like, this is a dangerous job and we really need to uplift our essential workers to like where they need to be. We definitely have that issue across America. In rural areas, they need first responders more than anything because they're so far from hospitals a lot of times and so far from essential services a lot of times. So that's why I brought that up. So I know that you and I don't have much more time together, but I have two additional questions for you. So we've talked about, policy and procedure, and what I want to know is about your work in the LGBTQ community, because I'm not familiar with your advocacy there and just want to know more about some of the things that you've done.
I wouldn't say that I've done a whole lot. I think awareness is there. When HB2 came up, certainly some advocacy, more activism around it, or advocacy around it, not activism. And now, I'm actually, this is a good thing to pick back up because we still have the HB 142, that didn't quite nullify everything, still sitting out there. We have an Equality Act that hasn't quite made it right across the finish line. But I haven't been doing a lot recently. You're right. And probably deserves more time and attention. You know, if there are some things happening currently in the community that I'm not aware of, let me know. It seems like everything's just so shut down right now that we're not seeing a lot of issues arise around that cause, but it makes me wonder where that House bill is. You know, I know with COVID, the General Assembly decided to take off the table all things non-COVID related until 2021, including our tourism taxes. And I bet that is also tabled as a result.
Yeah, I was just curious, as we really focus on making sure that we are including everybody. And so I'm just curious about that. And my final question to you is, outside of city council, what other political aspirations do you have? You're so knowledgeable. You just kind of seem so into this. This is your thing. I mean, I follow you on Facebook you all the time. Like, you want to be, head of a city one day, a governor? You have any plans?
Oh, no, I didn't even have plans to do this. I appreciate it. That's very flattering. I think I'm just a bit of a nerd that loves city building and planning. I've just always been doing it, whether I recognized it for what it was. When I went back to planning school, I said to someone, I wish someone had told me when I was a kid that this is a job you can have, because I sure love it. And I just kind of like fell into it. So no political aspirations. No, I don't want to run the city or anything. I knew at some point I would love to either work for the city or help the city in some way. And, I'm happy that this has become an opportunity and I'm excited about it. But if you'd asked me a year ago, I'd have said, nah, no way.
Well, I just have really enjoyed our conversation. So glad we got an opportunity to get to know you a little bit better. Like you, I didn't know that questioning political candidates was a thing. So this year I've questioned more candidates, done more forums, more debates than I've ever done. And who knew? Like, that was a whole job that I could sit there and say, oh, well, let me ask you this. So I definitely know about finding a passion, after a passion. So it was really good to talk to you. This was a great interview, and thanks for coming.
Thank you too, and I appreciate all you're doing. I've started following you and the blog too. My goodness, you have a lot of followers. But I tell you, sometimes I just have a minute to open Facebook and I'll see something like inspirational quote that you share, and I get a good laugh, and I'm like, yeah, back at it. So I appreciate all that you're doing. I'm glad you're doing these interviews. It has been one of the side effects of COVID that we're all on these screens now, and in some ways, it's become inaccessible for some that don't have internet, but those of us that do, we're all of a sudden like seeing and talking to more people in different ways. And I think it's been great. So I appreciate you doing this and all you're doing as well.
Well, thank you.